thank you, Chris, so much for having us and for running this session. It's a real pleasure to get to do this with Charisse. And like you said, we have been seeing some positive change, and just to have the space to have this sort of conversation at a conference like this is really exciting. My first one post-pandemic, so like a few factors like people, notes, the mic. So yeah, forgive any like clumsiness as we start. But so yeah, we're going to be looking at representation and visibility in the music industry and why it's more than just a numbers game, though there are a lot of important numbers, and why we want to see that representation across all elements of the industry, and a few big visible things are not enough, and why that can kind of sometimes make it look like there's more than there is. So a bit about me I'll start with. So I work in music research. I also work in what I call intercultural relations, which is sort of bringing together diverse communities and populations, helping us understand our appreciate our differences, but also understand our similarities and sort of create harmony, with a particular focus on groups that have been historically marginalized across race and ethnicity. What does that actually mean? So in terms of the workplace, that's everything from diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's also working with governments and things to target particular services on groups that have facing particular challenges, so refugees, for example. And in the commercial space, it's working with music industry in particular, looking at emerging markets, whether that's India, Nigeria, and China and markets like that, and understanding consumption habits there. And my real love, well, this is all my love, but is working with my dance company. So I've got a South Asian dance company and entertainment company, so get to work very hands-on with a lot of artists, particularly South Asian artists. I'm super passionate about that. And yes, very excited to be here. So Charisse, over to you and all your amazing work.
Hi, I'm Charisse Beaumont. I am Chief Exec at Black Lives in Music. First of all, I'm really thankful that I'm here. Chris, you put on a great conference so far. Is that you holding the baby in the back? Yeah. And you know what? That's what I'm just going to say. That you can't get more inclusive than that, and that's what we love to see. And I've been in the music industry for 20 years. Actually, let me short that down. 17 years. And I, like most people, started at the University of Westminster. Don't know if there's any people that went there in the crowd, but I quickly realised whilst being there in my first and going into my second year that there wasn't a place for me in terms of finding a career in the music industry, finding a job, internship, work experience even at a record label for someone like me, a black woman. And trust me, I tried. And after leaving uni, I started my own company in telecommunications, made a shed load of money, was able to start my own record label and management company. By the grace of God, was able to top the Billboard charts in 2013 with my artists. I've won Grammys, and due to family tragedy, had to take some time out of music and decided not to go back, actually do something in my life, get married and have kids and whatnot. And then I was invited to join the board at Help Musicians. And whilst on the board, I saw there was a disparity in jazz and classical music, a paucity of colour, if you would. And I was like, that won't do. Then we hit George Floyd, and we get a reckoning. And that's when I decided to do a business case about Black Lives in Music. And can I go on a little bit about Black Lives in Music? So Black Lives in Music, we do research. We use research and advocacy to campaign for equality in the music industry. And the reason why we started the research is because it didn't exist. There was no data at all on black musicians, on the black experience, black students. There's nothing at all. And any data that was out there was lumped into this BAME, which we don't like that term, this BAME. So even then, it's not segregated into doesn't really tell the real story. So we said, well, rather than starting off with any campaigning, we need to do something about that. So we done a survey, and we'll talk about that a bit later, right? Yeah, but got 2,000 participants. every one of them telling their stories, and their stories was damning, and not surprising if you're black, but quite damning if you read the report. You could actually read it for yourself if you go to blim.org.uk/report. And yeah, that's what I do.
Well, Charisse, well, first of all, that was very impressive. I have not won any Grammys, sadly, so I'm glad I went first with my intro. But I think what you flagged with the research and the report, so a lot of my work is on inclusive research, and there is just a real lack of data around minority populations or diverse populations. So what you guys have managed to do with the report with such large sample sizes, you've got robust data, it's super powerful. And I know that's a really integral part of the conference, so excited to delve into that, but really well done. Both reports are very comprehensive and very interesting, so do read those in your own time too. We mentioned that obviously we had the social reckoning. Now, in the last few years, it does feel like we've seen an acceleration of positive movement, as I know you like to call it. So we've got panels. I know we've had like different pledges. Working in the space for some time now, what do you think has been a real sort of positive acceleration in the last couple of years?
I think in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of talking. Yeah, I'll just leave that one there. And panels like this, which are okay. Sorry, Chris. Okay. Yeah? Yeah, I mean, they're okay. And I'll say why they're okay. Because we're not monolithic as black people. You know, we don't want to don't invite us to talk about diversity. Right? We do loads of things. You had Christine earlier on, who's like a flipping robot genius, destroying research and music, and you know, now she works for a black-led, woman-led organization in ticketing. Told her to give me a tip on the IPO when that happens. And then, you know, we do lots of different stuff, which you'll see today, and that's one thing I'll applaud Chris, and I won't take up too much time, is that he heard me when I said that. We do more than talk about diversity. So a lot of talking we've seen since 2020. Some organizations making investment, some organization realizing, oh, actually, we don't have diversity within our organization, and finding out what can we do about it. So I've reached out to organizations such as Black Lives in Music, and we've been able to help. So that's what we're here for, and yeah, we're seeing some positive movement in that regard.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, because I think we have seen these little waves being created, but you're right that we're not seeing bigger changes. Like, we're not necessarily seeing more artists. We're not seeing people in, throughout the music industry in corporate roles who will know how to work with diverse artists. So I guess in terms of getting into some of the whys, I think your report really covers a lot of those barriers really well. And we promised ourselves that this session would be more than just thinking about all the barriers and leaving feeling like, how are we going to ever make a change? Our aim here is to cover those so we understand those whys, and then leave with some quite pragmatic solutions on how we can approach those, which we'll attempt to do in the next 20 minutes. The report is, you mentioned the rationale for that and how that came about, and obviously it's got a lot of really robust data behind it. Almost 9 in 10 of music creators do feel from the report that they face additional barriers due to kind of race and ethnicity. That's a really, really high number by any means. We've kind of got a few different sort of core areas, but if we start with racism and belonging. So in the diversity space, there's a lot now in around increasing access and people into certain roles. But what we're finding is that they're not necessarily staying, because you don't have the systems or the structures that help people feel like they actually belong there, and the kind of mental pressures and various other pressures of not feeling like you're accepted can be extremely challenging, which we'll cover as well. But yeah, Charisse, anything you want to flag to start off with around belonging, and I can hit you with some data.
Absolutely. I think, so we said 88% of music professionals and 86% of music creators believe that, or agree that there are barriers to career progression. Of that, 56%, of that 88, 56% said it's due to experiencing racism. What I want to say is, you know, we've had our protests. That was really great for the reckoning. But just because the protests are finished, it doesn't mean racism's gone. And unfortunately, and I say this with a really heavy heart, I get at least a dozen calls or emails a week from black professionals, black creators, saying they've been discriminated against, or they're going through a grievance, or something's happening. Racism is prevalent within the music industry. Now, what does that look like in terms of your career? Promotions being overlooked. If you're a creator, can you imagine if there's any artists in the room being told to do a genre that doesn't quite sit with you? Especially if you're a black woman, the first thing they think, R&B vocalists. And that's not the case. We do all genres. And if I'm bold to say, you know, music, most of the genres that we enjoy came from black people. I think Sylvia hit on it earlier on. And I think it's important just to look at how we treat one another in the workplace and also create opportunities, because one of the main issues is that those opportunities aren't there for black people, and it's about creating opportunities.
And I think one of the particular areas is sort of around the marketing and artist development space. So the work I do with South Asian artists, every sort of once in a blue moon, one artist will get signed to a label, and we're throwing parties, and the next thing you know, a few months later, they've been dropped. And then you've got other artists who are like constantly in this trying to pass for not being Asian. How much do they play it down? How much to actually, you know, we've almost got this parallel industry, which I love, but it's built out of necessity. So that's one from that dynamic. But yeah, the artist kind of management side of things feels like it's a real blocker to even getting in, and if we can see more diversity there.
Absolutely. I think from an artist's perspective, and just to hit on what the South Asian community are going through, they've created a parallel industry. You know, this is not meant to be offend, but with black people, you know, Christine said it earlier, you know, black culture is culture. We don't even get the opportunity to create a parallel opportunity. We just get our music, songwriters, genres, production given to, if we're lucky, it might be a light-skinned black woman, but more than likely they'll probably be white. The investment is not made into black people, black artists. When's the last time you saw a black guy at #1? And if I'm wrong, please say so, because I'd like to know. I want to answer that question and get an actual answer. But when's the last black male soloist? When did he get to #1? Or can you name one?
No.
That's what I mean. Where's the investment into black artists, not music, artists? And that's something that we need to look at.
Yeah, for sure. And I think reading the reports, one really interesting thing is there's almost, you get pigeonholed, or there's only room for one. Like there can only be one Beyonce. If you're too similar to her, you can't make it in that space. And I think that's, like I said, South Asians, then at least we've got a whole pool of people that can be like, okay, well, we're not accepted here. Let's try and build this industry, which again is suboptimal, but it's in a way, you know, we're doing it. But yeah, it feels like, you know, where do you go? Like, where do people go if they're not, they can't be, you know what I mean? If they're not accepted or they're not signed, are they working maybe circuits kind of more in a grassroots level?
I mean, we create everything from grassroots as black people, and I'm sorry to sound like it's the way the questions lead in, so I'm just answering automatically, so please, it's not me to sound like I'm badgering. But we've come from slavery, we come from the gutter, and we make from nothing. That's what we do. So to find, where are we? We're here. This is our culture, we affect, we inspire. And that's what we do. So it's not where's our place, and it's not ultimately begging for a place. It's just highlighting and creating awareness of an equal and fair music industry. This is all we're trying to say. We want a music industry that is level for everybody, not just for black people, for trans, for LGBTQI, and I just said trans, LBG, and most importantly, disabled musicians who are going through number of barriers, and I might as well say that we're bringing out a report in the next couple of weeks, and it's not a pun, but it's something that's close to our heart, because one of the things that came out from the report, and we weren't able to promote at the time, was the issues that black disabled musicians go through. So you've got to think, if you're black, that's a barrier. If you're a woman, that's an additional barrier. If you're disabled, that's a triple threat. what opportunities and access are you going to get? So it's important that we look at this intersectionality and these nuances and tackle it, and we can do it together.
And so where intersectionality meets with, I guess, socioeconomics, we've got the sort of financial barriers that people will face, and high proportions of minority ethnic communities in the UK, are living in some sort of deprivation. That means the access to school services and then music facilities there, are just less. So hopefully it's changing. From the days I was in school, I just about learnt the recorder. but I think it's improving now, or at least that's an area of focus and something we do need to realize. And Charisse, maybe the work that you do with Black Lives in Music in the classical space can speak a little bit to those additional barriers that are faced by minority communities.
I mean, I don't want to stereotype, but as Black people, sometimes, the majority of us are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, so we don't get free music lessons, unfortunately, because of the government we've got now. On top of that, we're not coming from, well, I'll speak for myself, that might make it easier. I'm not coming from a background where my parent could afford to pay for me to have music lessons. So for us, it starts from the very beginning. It starts at grassroots. And then if you're lucky, and I like to use this analogy, if you bear with me, it's the journey of a Black musician. So for example, even if you managed to get some lessons somehow, some way, or you picked up a cello and you were phenomenal at it, like we know some people are, and then you get to go to a distinguished organization, a distinguished music school. You're faced with discrimination there, whether it's your name, how you're treated, how you're taught, and this is coming from evidence-based research. We've got the stories, we've got the qualitative data that backs this. The racism that they're affected in that affects their mental health. Some people aren't even able to complete their courses because of it. Then, if you're able to even make it out there, to get a job in an orchestra, you've seen what the problems look like. It's damn near impossible. That's why we've got Chineke, bless them, but one orchestra. And it's not for me to be on a tangent, Chris, sorry, but that's embarrassing. We've got to do something about that. So that's where that's coming from. So
yeah, no. And I think I was saying, for one opportunity that I see with music is that it does bring societies and cultures together. And like we said, it can highlight, like you mentioned, music. So I was saying to you earlier that my gran was like one of the most phenomenal, now I realize, musicians, because she used to play the Indian drum. And back when I was growing up, it was just like, no one really cared externally about that instrument. But, it's in me, and I love music. And like we said, in South Asian culture and Black culture, it's just ingrained within us. So I think that's starting to come across. Like we've seen artists like Arooj Aftab, who I think won a Grammy. She certainly has done really well, and that's authentic South Asian music that now with streaming services, etc., is, and music from the diaspora, the African diaspora, and also we're starting to appreciate that. It's like post the Despacito effect. So it does feel like there's a commercial need now to also make change. So hopefully we'll see some traction there. Obviously, the setting for artists in the UK is a very specific context as well. I don't know if you feel like because of that, because, for example, Afrobeats is doing so well globally, do we feel like things are changing for art? There's more investment in artists because there's almost like an opportunity?
No, not at all. If you've got to think of what we're dealing with here. I know we've got this whole streaming inquiry that's doing this at the moment, but if it wasn't for DSPs, and I'm not a fan of certain DSPs, but if it wasn't for that streaming, Black music as we enjoy it right now, drill going to #1, Afrobeat, etc., you wouldn't even know what it is, because the model before, the investment all went into people, other genres, if you would. Now we get to enjoy this culture of music, and it's more accessible to us. However, we're not seeing the financial investment being made to artists in particular who are Black, Asian, or ethnically diverse. And that's what we need to see.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. Then we need to focus on the talent here. I am Any meeting I have, I'm literally harping on about my dance company, putting it more on social media now. So I'm hoping people will come knocking on the door to really, really focus on that, because it's a shame and it's quite sad. I think there's a lot to give, and our artists give to the UK industry, to the economy, and it would just be great to, see the mainstream even just capitalize on that, to be honest, even if it's not from a point of view of this is the quote unquote right thing to do. There's a commercial opportunity. If we start then going into a few more of the solutions, and Chris, I don't know if we have time for Q&A or if we'll do a... Okay, so we've got 10 minutes. We can take some questions. If anyone does have any, please feel free to put your thoughts up, but we're going to sort of delve into some of those solutions. So in terms of the workplace and making the music industry more diverse so that people know how to work with different artists, I know there's a code of conduct that Black Lives in Music have come up with, if you want to share more around that and other things.
Yeah, I mean, we're announcing an industry-wide anti-racism code of conduct. You're like, oh, what do you need that for? I mean, if you saw my emails, we need it. And it's just not to, it's to teach people how to be anti-racist or become allies and just be kind. I don't want to fluff it up because it's not fluffy, but it's simple to be kind. So with our anti-racism code of conduct, there's going to be an education series that will accompany it. Now, if you want to know how you can get involved in that, you can actually be a part of the anti-racism code of conduct, but also take the anti-racism education series as well, learn about the Black experience, learn about just how we can all treat each other a little bit more kindly. In regards to other solutions, someone just asked me this just now, more Black people, people of color, not even Black people. I don't like people of color, that actually come out my mouth, sorry. Black, Asian, and ethnically diverse people at senior management, decision-making decision. It's nice that we're seeing this entry level and mid-management. If we're lucky, some people taking 20 years, some Black women taking 20 years to get to mid-management. That's nonsense, but that's our experience. We want to see more women, Black, Asian, and ethnically diverse people at director, at senior management level, and in leadership positions at board, so we can affect the music industry in a nice, healthy, equal, and fair way, rather than having certain archaic decisions being made that haven't changed over the years.
And how do we go about the sort of investment situation? Are there organizations that are giving specific grants, or how would we want to approach?
I mean, there are great. One of the things that's come out from the reckoning, or I like to say the resurgence of the civil rights movement, is that we've seen organizations actually create funds. Some people are complaining about where those funds go. Thankfully, at Black Lives in Music, we were a recipient of one of them, so they do give. But I will say, you've got organizations such as Power Up, who invest in Black music creators and industry professionals. Please look into that. But there's a lot more to do. We've done some data on our funding. I know, Chris, sorry, but we've done some data on our funding. I just need to share this with you. So for successful applicants, if a Black person is to apply for funding, in comparison to a white person, so I'm not being racist, we just made the comparison, right? So it was 72% of white people, white applicants are successful in the funding. Only 49% of Black people are successful. This lowers to like 32% if you're a Black woman. And it's even lower if you're Black and disabled, believe it or not. Funders really need to pull their fingers out and look at why. And we've got some data on why, and there are some real reasons why, but overall, not good enough. There's something going on there. So there are organizations that are giving out funding, but we do need more.
And then touching on the mental health side of it, it's a tricky topic. The stresses of being an artist. I mean, even the stresses of doing this panel, I was like, oh my God, like how are we gonna get this across? What if it comes out wrong? It's a tricky thing to do. So I think our hope is just to open up and broaden a sense of, okay, highlight people's perspectives and how they might be feeling. From the belonging piece, whether it's overt racism or not, you might be worrying that there is, or you're not accepted. So there's a range of different aspects to consider. So we hope that comes across a little. Of course, we've got Help Musicians are one of the partners. Can people go there for support or for understanding?
Absolutely. So Music Minds Matters is an awesome organisation. It's headed up by our very own Sylvia Montello. I know some Black, Asian and ethnically diverse people, creators, industry professionals have been using the services. There are a few therapists out there, a few Black therapists, soul surgery, you've got MIT therapy, you've got Musica therapy out there. And I really want to encourage you to use it if you feel the need. Unfortunately, according to our data, and even this is nuances because mental health within the Black community has only been started to get accepted now, so the numbers are quite low. We know it's higher than this, but 36% of Black music professionals, 36% of Black, so that's like a third, or just over a third, have experienced mental health issues due to racism. And that goes up to 42% if you're a Black woman. That's nearly half of the Black women in this room have an issue with mental health. And I'm not gonna lie, just because I said that, I've had to explore taking out some of those services myself just because of the job that I do. It's real. So it's just something that we need to tackle, and there are the services out there such as Music Minds Matters that can help.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap up soon. I think my final comment would just be, so I've done a lot of work on like the power of music globally, and I have seen in places, for example in South Africa, where people believe more in music to change and create social cohesion and social change more than government and policies. And so it feels like we as an industry have got so much opportunity, and hopefully we can sort of, harness that even more in terms of this.
Absolutely. I mean, music is a driver of everything that we do. It's tricky to see that the government doesn't see that, or some organisations don't see that, but we do. And music's been a soundtrack to all of the civil rights movements, all of the movements that we enjoy. Music is a soundtrack to it, and all the people in this room are part of that. So my hope is that we continue to, it sounds corny, continue to make that sound. But the only way we can do it is doing it together. So let's do it together.
Thank you.